Is this on? I just want to let people know there are 5 seats here in the front row that aren't taken. So as you're coming in, there's 5 seats in the front row that aren't taken. And we're going to set up a couple more chairs here on the side. For those of you just now coming in, thank you.
Maybe there's some nimble people who would like to sit on the floor. No nimble people, all old folks? A nimble person, yeah. Oh, a few more nimbles. Way to go, nimble people. Could we silence our cell phones if you haven't already? And could we just take a minute of silence to be here together? And please feel free to direct people who are still coming in up to the floor on the front if they'd like, or they can stand in the back. So let's just have a minute of quiet. This has been Michael's home for almost half a century. He was the anchor here. And the boat, the sails, the seaports, the ocean itself was Kay. But the boat left different ports and the anchor stayed with the boat. And the boat was our shared intention, as Kay spoke it in his words. Our intent is an active listening. It's an active, living present. It is the wick that's burning. It cannot be extinguished. No breeze can blow it out. The wick is stout. The oil is not fed by external influence or source. It has no cause. So the flame, wick, and oil endure. The flame of intent is to bring about a good, intelligent, capable, free human being. This is my intent, and one for all humanity, for we are all concerned. You cannot escape from this intent. You're involved in it as much as I am. You may shy away from it, disregard it, neglect it, but you're as much responsible as I. That was from The Whole Moment of Life is Learning. When I started thinking about speaking about Michael and Michael's many gifts, one picture came to mind. And it is one that many of us saw together in the early 70s. Do you remember when Apollo 17 sent the photograph of the Earth out in space? How many of you remember that image of the Earth? And that bringing Gaia back into focus, the reimagining of Earth as a living being, was supported also at the same time, around the same time in the earlier mid-70s, by a scientist named James Lovelock. Do you remember him? And the Gaia hypothesis. He took the name from the Greek goddess whose name Gaia meant globe and ground. So you take the dirt, the ground, and the sphere, and you have the Gaia. And so there was this resurgent from something that had been kind of quiet for a couple thousand years, that the Earth was a living, sacred thing. And so Michael, in 2018, wrote a poem called The Goddess. And I just want to read a small section from it. Great goddess of earth, goddess of sky, we see you in the blossoming ground, in the fertile valley, in the trees. We sense you in the mirroring waters, curving, crashing. We sense you in empty deserts. They cannot deny you. Even teeming cities, even the freeways and the railroads, even the airfields and the towers exist in your boundless embrace. That's just one verse of 4. So yes, our Michael, we've enjoyed his poetry, haven't we, all these years? And thanks to Ulrich, recently he published a wonderful book of poems that Carol will tell us about later in the program. So there's another image that came to my mind when I was thinking about Michael, and it is, maybe you've heard about the Buddhist tradition, a traditional image or myth that belongs with that. It's called Indra's net. Anybody heard of that? And I have to read it so I get it right. An infinite net, wherever the threads cross, there's clear and shining pearl that reflects itself and is reflected in every other pearl in the net, in an infinite pattern of reflectiveness. So I was thinking, Michael has created this net. Look at you. Look at all of us here together, reflecting off of each other in friendship, a deep friendship that Michael was a hub. I mean, did you ever see Michael's address book? How many of you received a birthday wish from Michael? How many postcards has he sent out in his lifetime? Right? I mean, he was Indra's net. He created a net, a network of love and friendship and inquiry and support and compassion, great deep listening. with his friends. And of course, we're celebrating him today, and we have many people who would like to speak on Michael's behalf. And so we've planned a program that will be this first hour with a few people who have prepared some comments, and then we'll take a tea break, and then we'll have another opportunity for people more informally to share. So that's the program for today. And it says 5 o'clock, but Yop said we could stay later if we wanted to. Yeah, I have a feeling people will want to talk more than till 5. So my last metaphor before I introduce or welcome Mark is that for the last 10 months of Michael's life, it's kind of like a 10-month-long twilight. You know, that beautiful twilight that comes at the end of the day when it's especially gold, and especially in this season when the sun is at a slant that makes everything really gold. And his lifelong friend Rachel said it represented, this 10-month period represented a distillation of Michael's life and how he was meeting death. Mainly how he was dealing with the not knowing, and also with so many friends, his friendships intensified. For myself, I could feel him transforming quietly right in front of me. And this was very touching. And another friend wrote an email saying, there he was, beaming at me from thousands of miles away. This is from Bill Taylor over at Brockwood. With his substantial new beard, his long hair, and his rosy cheeks, he looked like some California Santa Claus. He was just checking in early to see if I needed anything. We would reminisce for a while. I was always left wondering at how well he seemed with death as his constant companion. These calls were short, unexpected gems, but he was the biggest gift of all. So I would like to welcome Mark, and after Mark, Ivan, after Ivan, David, after David, Vivian and Yakov, after them, Carol, and then Yap, and we'll end for the first session here with a video. And then we can take a tea break and come back. And the first two speakers after the tea break will be Alistair and Ulrich. And then if you'd like to speak, it might be helpful if you were in the front of the room so you can just bop up and not have to maneuver around. Okay? So thank you for coming. And Mark, welcome.
That's it. I have so much to say I had to write it out. Sorry. Michael was such a presence in this place for so long. I can feel him here today. He would have loved this. He would have enjoyed coming to this. We gather to celebrate the life of a good man, Michael Krohnen, a man whose culinary artistry and friendships and devotion to Krishnamurti have left an indelible mark. In 1975, as we were putting together a school, it became clear we needed a cook. Someone who could prepare meals for the staff, the trustees, the students, and the endless stream of visitors and guests who began to come to Ojai. To begin with, Alan Hooker and Asha Lee prepared meals in Aryavahara kitchen, but word spread around the world that a new Krishnamurti school was beginning in Ojai, California. And Michael heard about it while he was in Japan. He wrote a letter to Alan Hooker, founder of the Ranch House restaurant in Miners Oaks, and Alan asked me if Michael should be invited to apply for the cook's job. I agreed, as we had no other applicants at the time. He arrived, and Alan and I interviewed Michael, who let us know quite clearly, frankly, that he would very much like the job, but that it would have to be on a temporary basis because he wanted to be free to follow Krishnamurti around the world and hear his talks. What started as a temporary lasted 48 years. Probably the longest lasting staff member in any of the four Krishnamurti foundations. Alan, Asha, and Krishnamurti himself were his early mentors. He approached cooking as an art form, infusing his dishes with love, intention, and a profound appreciation for the ingredients. Michael cooked for hundreds, if not thousands, in those early days, the last 10 years of Krishnamurti's life. There were many personalities who came and joined Krishnamurti for lunch. Michael enjoyed those personalities. There was Dr. Jonas Salk. There was Cyril and David Bohm and Margaret Trudeau, who was the wife of a prime minister and the mother of another prime minister. Then Governor Jerry Brown came to lunch. Governor Brown is still in touch with the foundation, and just a few months ago, he said to us that he couldn't remember the details of his conversations with Krishnamurti at lunch, but he clearly remembered Michael Krohnen, because Michael told him "Sir, you talk too much." That's from the governor of California. Then there was Persis Kambata. Persis Kambata was Miss Universe, and she was at the time acting in the Star Trek episodes, and her head was completely shaved. Krishnamurti made a comment about her bald head, and she shot back and made a comment about his comb-over. This endeared her to Michael no end, and he made every excuse to take her on a long walk around the property. Michael wrote a book. He brought to me a manuscript which was 1,500 pages. I told him that that's not publishable, and he engaged Stephen Smith to edit it down. And what I finally published for Michael was only 300 pages. I hope the original manuscript is somewhere in his personal archives, because in that form it was interesting. There are now Spanish, Chinese, and editions in India of Michael's book. The Kitchen Chronicles is a testament to Michael's culinary skill, and it is more than a collection of menus. It is a literary work that invites readers into the heart of the kitchen, where the alchemy of flavors intertwined with the wisdom of living in the present moment is felt. Hundreds of times at the lunch table, we heard Krishnamurti say to Michael, who was usually sitting opposite him at the table, "What's the news, sir?" Well, that phrase and what Michael did for those 10 years became a lifelong obsession for Michael. He kept up with the news of all kinds, all over the world. News of politics, personalities, wars, international trivia. Towards the end of his life, he was interested in AI, artificial intelligence, and he and I played with it a bit. I had a friend in India who sent us an AI dialogue between Krishnamurti and David Bohm on the virtues of eating Marmite. Michael got a good laugh out of that, but he realized the dreadful seriousness of the whole thing. We asked AI to create a dialogue between Krishnamurti and David Bohm on the importance of deconditioning the mind. In less than 2 seconds, a 3-page dialogue came out. I read it to Michael. He was horrified, absolutely horrified, because it was so completely accurate. If it had not been us, someone else reading that, you could not have detected that it wasn't real. Through his writings, Michael shared not only menus, but also the philosophy that guided his culinary creations. A philosophy rooted in mindfulness, simplicity, and an appreciation for the beauty of everyday life. More recently, a book of his poetry has been published, and it too embodies his devotion to the perennial wisdom of the teacher and his appreciation for the teachings. His presence was a source of warmth and friendship, and his genuine interest in other people made him a beloved figure in the lives of those who were fortunate enough to cross his path. Let's remember the joy he brought to our palates in the foundation and at Oak Grove School, the wisdom he shared through his words, and the kindness he extended to all who crossed his path. His devotion to Krishnamurti was impressive and gave devotee a good meaning. Rest in peace, Michael Krohnen. On several occasions, Krishnamurti was asked to give a summary of his teachings. Michael gave me this one and said it was his favorite. Attempt without effort to live with death in futureless silence.
Good afternoon. My name is Ivan Berkovics. Excuse me. There's a joke about Buddhism and its denial of the existence of a self or ego, which could also be applied to Krishnamurti's teaching. The joke is, if there is no self, whose arthritis is this? Standing here in front of all of you, my version of the joke is, if there is no self, whose nervousness is this? Michael and I were friends and neighbors. I first met Michael in the spring of 1981, but got to know him when I moved to Ojai in the fall of 1984. As there are other speakers, I don't want to talk too long, but I want to mention one remarkable aspect of his life. Although Michael learned English as a second language, probably in his teens, his command of the language, both spoken and written, was better than most native speakers. He read a great deal on scientific matters, had an extensive vocabulary, yet also managed to maintain a fluency in German as well, so that he never needed to search for words in either language. I would like to express my appreciation to those who assisted Michael since his paralysis in February. Firstly, the staff at the Artesian, the retirement home in Miners Oaks, where Michael spent his last months, 10 months of changing diapers several times a day, as well as medications and meals in a timely fashion, was not easy to maintain, I'm sure. Appreciation to the Krishnamurti Foundation of America and Japs Leuter for supporting Michael financially by paying his salary during the months he was incapacitated, and for providing and paying for the pod where his belongings were stored on KFA property, and for providing this gathering as well. An appreciation to those of you who visited him at the Artesian during these months and helping keep his spirits up. And finally, appreciation to Monica Auger, who was a friend of mine, who was kind enough to watch movies with Michael on many evenings at the Artesian, helped empty the pod of Michael's belongings, and who prepared the collage of photographs that you see in the dining room area. Thank you.
This is quite an impressive group. I can't remember ever seeing this room so full, and in and of itself, it's a wonderful tribute to Michael, and one that I'm sure he would greatly appreciate. I met Michael for the first time in August of 1975. It was just a few weeks before the opening of the Oak Grove School. I had recently been selected to serve as the teacher of academic subjects at the school, but I was still living in West Los Angeles with my wife at the time, Vivian. Michael was traveling from somewhere in California, and he stopped at our house and spent the night. And the next morning, we drove him up to Ojai. I was 28 at the time. He was 31, almost half a century ago. It was the beginning of a long and very dear friendship. Michael and I came from rather different backgrounds, but we had one thing in common: a deep and abiding love for the teachings of Krishnamurti, as well as for the man who expressed and in some ways embodied those teachings. Now, there was always a certain irony in our dual love for the teachings and for the man, because, as many of you may know, Krishnamurti always insisted that he himself was of little or no importance. It was only the teachings that mattered. And even the teachings only mattered to the extent that they served as a mirror with which we could observe and understand ourselves. And yet, for those of us who had the opportunity to know him, the man himself was rather fascinating. In person, he was often shy and unassuming, and yet he had an uncanny quality of grace and authenticity and warmth that was, for many of us, somewhat irresistible. And that was certainly how Michael felt. Every page of his book, The Kitchen Chronicles, is suffused with that sense of deep love and respect for the man. And that is why Michael's role as chef at the Oak Grove School was the perfect marriage of the individual with the job, because this was precisely the role that gave Michael the opportunity to have that direct contact and exposure to Krishnamurti that he craved and so appreciated. And to be sure, this was not unrelated to Michael's interest in the teachings, because in spite of Krishnamurti's protests, there was indeed a certain relationship between the two. Seeing the man in person in his daily interactions gave us the rare opportunity to witness what was and what was not compatible with psychological revolution. Who would have guessed that the man who said, "You are the world," would have had a particular fondness for detective novels? Whoever knew that the deep insight into the observer and the observed could coexist with irreverent jokes about Leonid Brezhnev or the Pope or heaven and hell. In these and many other ways, observations of the man gave subtle hints and clues into the meaning of the teachings. And so I'd like to share with you what those lunchtime meals were like. It's the clearest avenue I know of to give a glimpse into what Michael lived for. You might remember that the subtitle of his book is 1001 Lunches with J. Krishnamurti. But this passage from my book, The Unconditioned Mind, provides a more succinct and perhaps a slightly more objective or more neutral account of those events. When Krishnamurti was in Ojai from February through May of each year, it was his custom to have lunch in the long dining room of Arya Vihara, in the downstairs portion of the building where I lived upstairs with my wife. Lunch was scheduled to begin at 1 o'clock, but Krishnamurti usually arrived 10 or 15 minutes late. He would walk down from his cottage and enter Arya Vihara through the back kitchen door. There he would greet Michael Krohnen, the chef and unofficial master of ceremonies, and find out what was for lunch. While final preparations were underway, the lunch guests would be gathering in the living room. Krishnamurti might help Michael by carrying 1 or 2 dishes out to the serving room. When he had determined that everything was in order, he would walk from the kitchen area down the long dining hall to the living room and announce quietly that lunch was served. A line would then form of all those present down the side of the dining room and into the serving room, where the meal was set out in buffet style. As Arya Vihara was his home, Krishnamurti felt that he should be last in line. This was a matter not only of courtesy, but also because Michael might have miscalculated and not prepared enough of one dish or another, and Krishnamurti would have been uncomfortable taking a serving for himself at the expense of anyone else. I felt I should adopt a similar policy since Arya Vihara was now my home as well, and so I tended to gravitate toward the end of the line, often right in front of Krishnamurti. In this regard, however, we were all trumped by Michael, who was also sensitive to the obligations and prerogatives involved. Michael insisted that he should come behind even Krishnamurti in line. This sometimes led to a little jocular jousting for position, but Michael had no doubt that he, as chef, had to be last at all times, and eventually Krishnamurti acceded to his sense of certainty. One's place in line was a matter not unrelated to seating position at the table. Krishnamurti had his own preferred place, a corner position at the far end, and many of the guests would probably have liked to sit near him, but no one wanted to be seen as seeking him out or hungry for his attention. As a result, the table tended to fill up from the middle outwards, with 1 or 2 choice positions, either next to Krishnamurti or opposite him, often available to those at the end of the line. Michael invariably occupied one of these prize spots. It was his reward after toiling all morning in the kitchen, and I was often able to take another. Krishnamurti's manner at lunch was shy and subdued. After everyone had served themselves and settled into their places, and the mixed hum of utensils and chatter had begun to fill the room, he would look up at Michael and inquire, "Well, sir, what is the news?" Michael would be ready with a full report on the events of the day, gleaned from a survey of radio reports and newspapers, especially his favorite, the internationally minded Christian Science Monitor. For 5 or 10 minutes, Michael would regale Krishnamurti with a select rendition of topics, chosen with an eye for general significance, or for the light they cast on human nature or the overall state of mankind. Krishnamurti listened most attentively and often followed up with specific questions. These could lead into open-ended conversations on subjects of every variety with contributions from anyone at the table. The overall spirit and tone of these conversations was casual, but conducted within an atmosphere of courtesy and good taste. The table was often adorned with one or two vases filled with flowers, freshly cut from the garden, and the vegetarian cuisine was exquisitely prepared. After everyone had finished eating, Krishnamurti would remain seated for 10 or 15 minutes, or longer, depending on the course of the conversation. Unless they had urgent business to attend to, no one else got up to leave while he remained. In these somewhat contemplative intervals, the conversation might assume a deeper tone or add a richer degree of color. The central issues of psychological inquiry were still too serious for table talk, but more peripheral psychological topics might enter in. Those present might offer views on yoga, dietary fads, or the latest guru in the public eye. Krishnamurti might have some joke to tell, one often involving God, world leaders, or global events. At times, a gentle silence would fall upon the room, and the essentially sacred quality of the atmosphere, a rare perfume of beauty, order, and conviviality, would become palpable. When Krishnamurti got up from the table, everyone else followed suit. He would leave by the back kitchen door and walk slowly up to his cottage. And the highlight of the day was over. I visited Michael probably 15 or 20 times during his months at the artesian facility. For most of these visits, I kept the conversation cheerful and lighthearted, and that was not difficult because Michael liked it that way too. But on one of these occasions, our talk took a more serious turn. Since it was pretty clear that the end was coming soon, I asked him whether, looking over his life, whether he had any regrets. And he answered easily and without hesitation. He said, absolutely not. He said he had lived the most wonderful life that he could possibly imagine.
See if I can get through this. Michael had a long-standing, dear relationship with Rachel Fernandez, who lives in Brazil. And she wrote this letter, which I will read. She said, "Sorry I could not put a long-term relationship into a short statement. It was 1989 in Rio de Janeiro with Brazilian Krishnamurti Committee when I first met Michael. There were roughly 12 of us participating in one of those long and boring meetings. It was too hot, and the windows were closed, like our minds. Michael was silent. Suddenly he stood up, opened the window, and stayed there looking at the landscape. Finally, some fresh air. In our long-term relationship, we have traveled to many K study groups in Brazil, also doing radio and TV interviews, presentations, and dialogue groups. Michael helped us with K meetings in a natural way, not as someone from an institution, the KFA. At the K Center in Tiradentes, where I live, Michael was the same, not as an authority. What he really loved was talking about K, about the teachings, about us and the world. We traveled a lot together in US, Europe, Greece, but in recent years we've stayed more in Ojai and in Tiradentes. We never knew which kind of relationship we had at the given moment. Sometimes we thought we were friends, other times lovers, other times partners, family. Whatever it was, we were really close, and it was adventurous, funny, and also demanding. Close relationship is quite a challenge, Kay used to say. In the beginning, it was easier because Michael didn't know Portuguese, and I knew only profound words of the K vocabulary. So we had to slow down the interaction for checking the words, for using the dictionary, etc. And so the personal reactions were exposed. Michael liked poetry, to write and to read them. Sometimes I've asked him to read Rilke poems in German because of the beautiful and peculiar sound. We've used to listen to classical music, and sometimes we sang together with it, St. John Passion, or he whistled some part of the music. Michael liked roses, wine, fruits, chocolate, films, flute, art, nature, the ocean, the earth and the skies. He called the stars, planets, and constellations by their names. His room was filled with books, cards, newspapers, and comics, photos. He enjoyed lots of friends, and later at the Artesian, he was so glad when people stopped by or phoned him there. The 10 months he was there, it seemed he went through a kind of separation from his life. He was sweet, caring, with an inner stability, ready to talk about whatever and to listen to what was going on with his friends. He and the network of friends transpired love and care. We more or less knew death was close. Maybe he also felt its presence. Even though our encounters would be light, there was this kind of seriousness. But Michael had no complaints, no self-pity, and most of the time he was lucid and with humor. One thing he maintained till the end was a profound love, admiration, and gratitude to Kay and the teachings which he had expressed in his poem. Thank you, sir. Yes, I'd like to introduce Yaakov Noy. Yaakov, in our visits to Michael, would often bring his flute and play tunes for him. And this tune is called Gentle Rain. It's a Brazilian tune.
Right. I hope I remember.
Maybe you won't remember.
You never know. Hi, everybody. It's first time.
Hello, friends of Michael. My name is Carol Sylvester Gray, and I first met Michael when he was the chef at Oak Grove School in the early days, and I became a lifelong friend of his with my husband Darcy, and I'm here today to read a poem from the newly published book of his poems. It's called Journeys of the Mind, 33 Poems to J. Krishnamurti. Kay's Words, Ojai, California, 1977. Kay's Words. The depth of his words goes beyond all words, reaches and touches the essence of things. The total image evoking actuality. A voice like the summer wind which gently brushes the 5-fingered leaves of the sycamore trees along Horn Canyon. Gently turns them around so that the sunlight illuminates their fervent greens.
I have nothing written down. I have just a few words to say. The main thing that's how I realize now Michael is passing, in the process of his passing, how I take things for granted. He was always here. He always took care of this center. When I arrived here, he was so unusual how committed he was into building this place and to be here for people and to engage in discussion. And so I, at the time, 5 years ago, 10 years, I didn't realize how unusual that was. Somebody lifelong, fully committed and dedicated to this. So that I feel, and he has grown the place since Mary Symbolist, of course, died, to what it is now, and created the atmosphere. Yeah, a few things I would just like to add. You know, I've heard all the other speakers before me say one thing I didn't hear, but in my relationship that I've seen a lot with him, Michael was a man of strong feelings, up and down, and there was a lot of discussion, and then I would feel and there was a beauty in navigating that. But one particular thing that stands out. Because I first met Michael in 1995, so what is it, 30 years ago, somewhat, in Brockwood. So I started in Brockwood, and I helped in the kitchen, and so that's why I saw him first, because he also came to Brockwood once a year to cook there. And of course, you know, we all love his cooking, but I was a kitchen help, and it was a mixed bag, because besides his cooking was really good, he loved to talk, so we had to make sure that everything was ready in time. So it was always navigating, and then he would engage in another dialogue while he was cooking, and we were all waiting there. And then and the other moment, and that's in the same period, is I came into the center in Brockwood, and he was really upset. So I thought, what's happening? I know somebody in India published, and they say Krishnamurti is a theosophist, and he was so upset about it. So I see him, and it was the time before there was an email, so he would he would write a fax and he would run to the tables. And at that time, all the old timers like Michael, Friedrich Krohnen, Mary Zimbalist, and others would sit there and he would text and read it out and go back and re-edit it and then fax it to India. And as a gladiator, you know, he was. Yeah, so I personally will really miss him. Also, from my family, Christy, he lived with Christy and Christy's aunt. Christy is my wife, in their house. That's where he wrote the book. And I heard all the stories there when they were writing the book and how. So he's, as a personal friend, as a family friend, he's very close. And also as a colleague, you know, it was always a joy to sit with him, to come into his office or in the book room and to chat with him. And lastly, you know, the last few months, if I came to the Artesian, you could see his eyes lighting up, and I said, so, he said, Jaap, because his legs were severely disabled, so he couldn't walk anymore. But to the drugs or something else, he didn't really acknowledge that. So, Jaap, I can walk again, he said. I can walk. Oh, great. I said, so can I come back to the center? Because I want to be in my office again. I want to be in the book room again and talk to people. I said, yes, we will do that. I mean, let's go first. Let's try it out. Let's first go for dinner next week. So that was my last conversation I had with him. He was still so hopeful to come back to this place and to be back in his role. So, and I know also, it has been said, he would love this so much. This was his thing. Maybe the last thing, that I remember the last week when he was here. He fell at a certain point, and that's why he couldn't get up, and he was lying for six hours on the floor in his room before we found him. But we had a dialogue in that extra room next to Krishnamurti's bedroom, and there was a lot. And normally in the dialogue, he would always, at a certain point, quote Krishnamurti and say something, and we would always go off in something else, and he would, no, but Krishnamurti said, okay, good, yeah. But this conversation, he was not, and I remember just noticing how he was sitting in the corner, and he had this big smile on his face, and he was just sitting, and I said, Michael, what is happening? You look so light or something, and it was so beautiful to see him. He didn't say anything during that whole dialogue, and he was just sitting there in complete peace or something. So that's my last words.
So, the mic may not be on. Well, we're going to play a little excerpt of Michael Krohnen reading the poem, Thank You, Sir. It was recorded at a prior May gathering here, or at the school, actually. So I'm going to move this mic out of the way, and then we'll start the video.
did films on Krishnamurti, books, including and panel exhibits. Very wonderful lady, and she's still alive. I think she's 98, 97 or 98. And anyways, she asked me to contribute something to the book that she brought out, Krishnamurti 100 Years. It came out on the anniversary of Krishnamurti's 100th birth anniversary. And so I wrote an article on Krishnamurti's humor, because I love his humor and his joke telling. And I can tell you a couple jokes too. but I wrote this poem which was put at the very end. And in it I mentioned Halley's Comet. You may have heard of Halley's Comet. It happens every 75 years. And curiously enough, 1986, the year that Krishnamurti died, was the year of Halley's Comet. But I just looked it up recently on the thing. Again, what was the peculiar thing? The comet was not very visible from the Earth because it was behind the sun. So it wasn't as brilliant and overwhelming as it often or usually is. So anyway, so I mentioned that's Halley's Comet. Comment. So the poem goes like this. It's entitled, "Thank You, Sir." Thank you, sir. Whoever you were, whatever you were, thank you for having touched my life, much rarer, more unique, more splendid than Halley's Comet. More like the sun, the moon, and all the stars rolled into one glorious event. Perhaps I cannot claim and say, yes, I have been changed, been transformed at the root, the wellspring of my being, of my consciousness. But thank you for having touched my life with your presence, with your smile, your laughter, with your friendship, which was but sheer love and compassion. Thank you for having touched my life. And the teachings, majestic, impersonal, star-bright, a beacon for all humanity for many, many years to come. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Otherwise, yes, somebody else.
Shall we just say thank you, sir?
Thank you, sir.
So we'll take a break now for about 15 minutes and meet back here for anybody else who would like to speak on my behalf. Starting with Ulrich and Alistair and Anat. And then we'll hear from the rest of you. Okay, thank you.
Hello? Is it on? Okay, welcome back, everyone. Does anybody have a whistle? Let's just close the doors. No? What? Okay, let's start with some silence. If everyone could take a seat, please. Thank you. What would Michael do? Hello. Welcome back. So the way that this second half will go is anybody who wants to can come and sit over here and be the next up to the mic. And when we're all done talking, the party's over. And we'll just start missing him more than ever. But thank you all for coming, and thank you to everyone who is speaking on his behalf. I don't think it is on very high. Okay.
Hi, my name is Alistair, and I've been the gardener here at Pine Cottage since 1978, quite a while. And I want to start by reading a poem that Steve Smith, the husband of Wendy Smith, who both live in England, asked me to read out, because it's a poem that he knew that Michael liked, and Michael said it encapsulated his relationship with nature. So the poet is John Clare, who, when I looked him up today, was described as the greatest poet of nature in the English language, and he was writing in the first half of the 1800s. So I've been asked by Steve to read it again, as a memento and a tribute to Michael. And this is Steve's words: "Farewell, fellow traveler, brother poet, dear friend. Such poems and such people are rare." And the poem is called "The Peasant Poet." He loved the brook's soft sound, the swallow swimming by. He loved the daisy-covered ground, the cloud-bespeckled sky. To him the dismal storm appeared the very voice of God. And when the evening rack was reared, stood Moses with his rod. And everything his eyes surveyed, the insects in the brake, were creatures God Almighty made. He loved them for his sake. A silent man in life's affairs, a thinker from a boy, a peasant in his daily cares, a poet in his joy. So, Michael obviously touched us all. This is an enormous group of people, and that's quite astonishing. It would be hard to imagine anyone else that any of us know filling this room when we pass. I mean, it's a great congregation of friends and family that he developed over the years. And when he was in the Artesian, the administrators and the nurses there were very fond of him because he was always cheerful and happy and didn't complain. He was just a perfect bedridden patient. So I asked Michael a few months ago about his youth because I knew nothing about him before he came to Ojai, and he gave me a few paragraphs. And I printed some information from that in an obituary that's in the Ojai Valley News this week. If you haven't seen it, you can pick it up at the Ojai Valley News office on Signal Street. But he was born in 1943 in Germany, and his pregnant mother had been moved away to a rural area because the Nazis wanted to keep the mothers with the future of the German race, like away from the cities that were getting bombed. So he was born in a small town. And Krohnen isn't even his father's name. You probably don't know that, but he never knew his father. He never met his father. And his mother never spoke about his father and never answered any questions about him. So Krohnen was the name of his stepdad that his mom married when he was around 1. So that was the only dad he knew. And he studied English at school, and he developed a wanderlust, and he'd spend his vacations as an older teenager traveling around Europe, France, Spain, and then he visited North Africa. He met a fellow traveler named Byron Allison, who was from California, and they became fast friends, and that was a very important person for the rest of his life. And at one point, they traveled from Tunisia all the way around through the Eastern Mediterranean, Israel, Greece, and then back to Switzerland together. And then Michael was interested in coming to the US, and Byron's family was kind enough to sponsor him and give him a green card. So that was like his ticket here to California. And he spent time with Byron and his friends that were all at university at that point, and I think he was living in LA, and he would hitchhike down to San Diego on the weekends where his friends were. And at one point, one of them arrived with a little book of Krishnamurti writings, and that sealed the direction of the rest of his life. We've talked about him being, people have talked about him being at Arivahara, living up here for nearly 50 years, and there probably has never been anyone before that's lived on this property for 50 years, and there probably won't be anyone again that will live on this property for 50 years. I mean, they'd have to come here at 20 and then live here till they were 70. So he will probably be forever the longest inhabitant of this beautiful property. And thinking about his book, 101 Lunches, 1,001 Lunches, excuse me. If those lunches were about an hour, maybe more, he probably spent more time in the presence of Krishnamurti than anyone else in Krishnamurti's recent years, apart from Mary Zimbalist and Scott Forbes. So that's an interesting way of looking at his life. I'd also like to mention that in Mary Zimbalist's later years, when she was getting less fit and couldn't drive, and he was right there because he was on the property. He was doing the shopping and the errands and taking things to the mail and cooking for her, and we should all recognize that. And then a few years ago, he asked myself and Carl Talbot there by the door, to sign his medical power of attorney. And friend asks you that, it's not hard to say yes, or not hard to say no. So we signed that, and so that became important when he had the fall and was moved to the Artesian, because he was under hospice care at that point, and that meant that any medical treatment had to be okayed by one of the two people that had signed that form. And so part of that included going to the dentist. I mean, he never went to the doctors. He was thinking of going to the doctors to see how far the prostate cancer had traveled, because he seemed fine when you talked to him, and the picture of what was going on inside wasn't clear. But then he decided not to at the end, before the visit happened. But he did want to go to the dentist, and I accompanied him to the dentist because somebody had to accompany him to okay the treatment, so it had to be me or Carl. And so he had his teeth cleaned, and then in December he made an appointment himself to go to the dentist and have the 2 cavities dealt with that he declined to do when he had his teeth cleaned. He didn't want to spend the $600. He said, no, not going to do that. So then he decided to, and he made an appointment, and I didn't know about it, and for some reason he didn't get ready at the Artesian in time to catch the bus that takes you in a wheelchair to appointments and things. And the bus only waits for 5 minutes. If you're not ready when it's coming, then it goes away. So he lost that appointment. We made another appointment, and I went with him to that, and waited probably half an hour in the office until he was ready to go into the room, and he was a little drowsy that day. But he got into the dentist's room, and the dentist was happy to treat him in his wheelchair because there's no way to move him from there into the dentist chair. That would take equipment. And so at that point, Michael's head was kind of bowed forward, and the dentist said, look, he's not lifting his head up. Obviously, you have to be like that to open your mouth and have your teeth worked on. So that just wasn't happening. So the dentist said, well, we can't work on him today, and that was clear. So we took him out to the waiting room. And to get these buses, that take you to and from places in your wheelchair, you have to call up the day before. So the day before, I had to call up and arrange the bus to take him there. And I didn't know how long the treatment would be, so I said like an hour and a half. So we were out there in the waiting room waiting for the bus to come to take him back, and that was a period of about an hour. And he looked like he was dozing and nodding off, and at one point the dentist came out, because he was a very kind dentist, and felt his pulse and said, oh, he has a good pulse. That was 12:45. And then at 1 o'clock, one of the receptionists there, who was sitting in the office with a window out to the waiting room looking right at where Michael was. And I was, because I'm an hour in the waiting room, I was reading a detective story. And said, could you check on him? He looks like he's not responsive. And I went over and touched him, and he was gone. So he died right there in a wheelchair in the dentist's office. So then 911 gets called, and the fire department come, and the cops come, and Amber from the Artesian came, and Michael and Ivan and Monica came, and there's all the stuff you have to do. And it took a few hours for the funeral home to send a vehicle, because they're in Ventura, but they say, well, an hour to an hour and a half. Well, Ventura's 20 minutes away, we know, right? So anyway, we waited over 2 hours and sat there in vigil with him, and it was really an honor to do that. And never been around a person that has just died before, but I was very proud to be there for that distinct moment. Thank you. From Derek.
A dear friend.
Farewell, old friend, a traveling companion, and fellow cook. You had many friends to help you on the road. Not by chance they came. I smiled when they told me you passed away in the waiting room, no longer waiting.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. My name is Ulrich, and I have known Michael for many years. I don't know since when, but during the last 2 and 3 years, we became very close friends. We met regularly, and we discussed always 3 things: what happened in Ojai, what happened in the world, and what happened in the universe. He always wanted to discuss everything. And he knew a lot what was happening in Ojai, in the world, and in the universe. So, and it was a lot of fun. We always looked forward to, he called it the summit. We have to have a summit. And very often, either he emailed me or he was in front of the Ojai retreat where I worked. He said, Ulrich, we need to have a summit. So many things happened. We need to discuss this right now. So anyway, we met regularly and discussed everything. In Ojai, we mainly discussed about KFA, City Council, Ojai retreat, and everything in between. And it was really very interesting. And what I really admired of Michael, he never spoke about himself. Most people I know speak most of the time about themselves, and he didn't. He was so curious about what happened everywhere. And it was really wonderful. Then when he went to the Artesian, we went on with the summits, but the focus shifted a little bit. And this is because of this book. And I want to tell you what happened, the story. Because some people said, I did publish the book. I did not publish the book. I had a very small role in the book. But let me tell you what happened, because it's really interesting. He shared his poems with another guest at the Artesian. It was a woman also from Ojai, and he showed her his poems. And I knew her too. So one day she called me, said, Ulrich, we have to meet. I have something very important to show you. Okay, we met, and then she showed me Michael's poems. And she said, we have to publish this. This is so amazing. We have to publish it. And so I read it, and I agreed with her. But I said, you know, we have to ask Michael. So I asked Michael, and he immediately said, yes, we should publish it. And I asked him several times over the days to be sure that he really wanted it. And each time he got more excited, more passionate about this book. Yes, we should publish it. And then fortunately, Margaret, a designer, and her husband, who is here, they said, we are willing to help. And I said, that's wonderful. Because first we thought we could do it through Amazon. They say, no, we know all this business, we can do it. And I said, yes, but it has to be quick, because we didn't know how long Michael was living, you know. Because one day he was in good spirit and almost like before, and then sometimes he was close to dying. He had an oxygen mask, they gave him morphine. So I said, push it. Tell his publisher, we don't have time. And they said, we cannot do anything to accelerate it. But what they did, in 2 weeks, 100 copies were published. 2 weeks. And Michael was so happy. And immediately he emailed Rachel, you know, his girlfriend in Brazil, about the book, how he liked it. And you know, just the cover was wonderful, because in Michael's poems, this picture was inside. It was just a title. So how it came out, it was just absolutely beautiful, and everybody liked it. And then the idea came up about the book signing. And then Michael again, he loved it. Yes, let's do it. And then he said, where can we do it? I said, well, we asked Artesian, probably outside, and they did a wonderful job to arrange the whole thing. And about 30 people showed up, and he autographed every single book. And so he was very happy. And then a few days later, he said, I forgot something. Then the idea of a book signing tour came up. He said, yes, we should do a book signing tour all over the world. And I didn't say anything, but then he said, I want to send some books to my friends. They shouldn't pay. I said, that's fine, just send it. So then, so I brought him 10 envelopes, and then he started the first 3 books he wanted to send to Friedrich, Claudia, and Joachim. And he really took time to write to each of the 3 some lines. He took time and he read it again and again to be sure that's absolutely what he wanted to say. And then he asked me, please Ulrich, check it. I want to be sure that it's correct, So of course it was wonderful. And so the next days I sent him away to Switzerland, and that's the day when he passed away. What he also said, he said, I want that this book be all over the world, in all case centers, in all foundations, in all the schools. So I said, yes, let's start with Ojai, and then the world, and then the universe. He loved it, let's do it. So as he couldn't send more books to friends, because the next day he passed away, I bought all the remaining books. There were 24 books here, and as your friends, just help yourself. Free, okay? And if you have ideas how this book could be sent to the foundation school, please let me know, because that's what he wanted. And then, interesting enough, just yesterday, I got an email from Friedrich, because he got the books. It took about 3 weeks. And he wrote, Dear Ulrich, we have received Michael's books, and I think the book is amazing. I think the book is amazing, and he wants to order more books and give it to friends, and so it's now already over the world. He transcended Ojai, and then afterwards it will go through the universe. So as everybody agreed that this book is amazing, I mean his poem is amazing, I want to read just 2 passages of the last poem actually. It's called Absolute Zero K, and he loved it. That's his 2 favorite poems. The first one, Thank You, Sir, and the last one, Absolute Zero K. I just read 2 passages. His life no more, from where the teachings blossomed forth, a blessing for all of us. The lotus fragrance lasts from time into timelessness. Also the lotus perished. Great and compassionate friend, who died just past midnight, and all suffering ended. Here we are, the rest of us, humanity. You left a jewel in our hands, incomparable, precious jewel. Thank you.
I met Michael in 1988 when I first came to Ojai, and I think it was 89, first international trustee meetings, and I was helping with the kitchen. So I got to spend quite a bit of time with him then. That's quite a long time already. And I've lived here, managing the retreat for 15 years. And he was my neighbor, I guess, for a long time. And as I've been visiting him at the Artesian, I was really touched of how well he took his condition. And there's something, and I've known him for a long time, and he had, as all of us, we had all kinds of sides. It's just like Yap was saying. There's the sweet and all that, and he became so soft. There's something that just softened, that was a real joy to be around. But I have a guitar, so it's not, probably can't do both, anyway. But either nothing or both of them maybe, or maybe it doesn't matter. So I was going to sing a song that he really liked, and I'm going to repeat what others are saying. I would have so much loved for him to be here. I really miss him here with this kind of happening for him. Like, why don't we do celebration of life, and the person can, I don't know that everybody would have loved to have so many people show up, but Michael would. Right here in Pine Cottage, wow. So, and it's, I was going to sing something in English, but Karen said no, he liked this one. So it's going to be in Hebrew. Some of you have heard it. But שיר לי פשוט, כמו הים, כמו העץ, כמו האבן. שיר לי פשוט, כמו הים, כמו העץ, כמו האבן. שיגע בי נקי, שישרוף אותי השקט, שיבלע אותי אמיתי. שיר שיגע בי נקי, שישרוף אותי השקט, וכל מי ששומע ירגיש איתי, שישמעו אלה שהלילה ישנים אוניית מלאכים בים השקט התמיד. זה הבית שעומד כבר שנים בין אותם הבתים, הוא יחיד. וידעתי שאיש לא יזכיר, ורציתי
לזכור את השיר שיגע בי נקי, שישרוף אותי השקט, שיבלע אותי אמיתי. שיר שיגע בי נקי, שישרוף אותי השקט, וכל מי ששומע ירגיש איתי שישמעו אלה שהלילה, אלה שלמעלה,
Hi everyone, my name is Holly, and I had the good fortune of working with Michael for the time I worked here at the Krishnamurti Foundation for off and on and off for about 8 years. And wow, this morning a poem wrote itself through me, and I think Michael is in this poem. I think he wrote it with me. So I wanted to share that with you. And I also, just reflecting on, I would say in my life, Michael, you have been one of my teachers. As I experienced Michael, I'd be busy away at my desk or preoccupied with things to do, and he would come in and he called me Holly G. Hello, Holly G. How are you today? And I'd be like, oh, Michael, I'm so busy. I barely have time for a hello. That was my attitude. And now, slowly over time, I realized I was like cutting myself off from a whole burst of love. So I learned over time to stop what I was doing, to give full attention to the being in front of me, and to receive everything that he had to share. And in passing, we would talk, it's true, he wanted to talk about what was right in front of you to what was infinite and beyond. And I loved it so much, I didn't ever want to go back to work. So he did a good job of opening my heart. So that's why I would call him one of my teachers. When I picture Michael, one of my positions here was to coordinate the guests that would come and live and work here, the resident students. And Michael, being the caretaker of this land for so long, and me not having that history, I didn't quite understand his ferocity, his ferociousness at times. Like you'd picture a gargoyle on the edge of a castle, guarding it, and Michael would be that gargoyle. He would show up as the gargoyle, like, what are you doing in the kitchen at this hour, or whatever it was, and I think, man, is that man grumpy, But now, like, it's sinking in, oh yes, the deep, deep love was what was speaking through him, the deep love he had for this place, for Krishnamurti, and everything that Krishnamurti meant to him. So it's interesting how life is, and sometimes you have to learn, as you go along, and maybe even after the person's stepped away from your life, you really see the full breadth of what they offered. So I'm so grateful to be here today, and thank you, Michael, for writing this poem through me today. This is called For Michael. Ugh. How can our uniqueness be our commonality? Beneath the skin, a mystery, as ancient as the sun, shining equally as radiant. Poppy or daisy, lily, rose, bird of paradise, nature in its expression as flower takes on a myriad of forms. Blessed are we who tend to the flower garden of friendship. Though it may weather drought or storm, rainfall, soft breeze, all seasons, circling around and through. At its center, ever renewing, seeds of the deepest love. Love that causes the stars to shine. Love that smiles back at me through your eyes. Though the body of Michael has had its season, the spirit of Michael, sparkling wit, wordsmith, lover of mangoes, playful artist, remains eternal. Thank you.
I'm also someone who was lucky enough to work with Michael for 7 years. I never worked here as many hours as Holly. I worked a couple of shifts a week, and for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, and then for the next 3 or 4 years, I've just come in occasionally. When they have need of me, I come and help at the retreat. And so, because Michael lived in the retreat, I would always see him, and also because we did a handover at the end of the day. And so Michael would come in and make sure whether any guests still needed to arrive. So even if Michael and I weren't meeting every time I was here, we were at least talking. But what Michael was to me when I was thinking about it is he was the giver of small gifts. He loved to leave something on my desk, whether it was something delicious to eat, or an article that he thought was interesting, or one of his poems. He might give the gift of coming into the office and sitting down and taking that time. He called me Annie. Annie, how are you today? What is happening in your life? And then we would share. And he would tell me a little bit about his life too, and we would share. And the other thing is, I only knew that side of Michael. I don't know anything except the Michael who had this amazing laugh, and we would laugh together, who came in with cheerfulness and brightness, or even if he was having a rough day, especially as his health was declining, would come in with hopefulness. And so he was a great, great blessing in my life, and it was a small friendship, but a big friendship in my heart, small in time and big in my heart. So really grateful to you, Michael.
I'd like to share a few memories with Michael. My name is Atul and my partner Laura is here. And we have known Michael for over a dozen years. As a precocious teenager in India, I read Krishnamurti's books voraciously, and so Ojai was always at the back of my mind, but I never really knew where it was. Until fate had it such that I moved here several years ago. So it was almost an accidental visit here at the retreat that I met Michael. Upon entering the retreat, I was immediately taken by this calm and serene and peaceful place. And while I was browsing books in the library, this gentleman with rather peaceful demeanor, he struck up a conversation. I assumed he was a visitor like me, so I asked him if he had read any of the books. Turned out that not only he had read most of them, but he had in fact written one of them. And he proceeded to gift me his book, The Kitchen Chronicles, A Story of 1001 Lunches, and his extraordinary connection with Krishnamurti and his life. So what started as a chance conversation continued over the next several years as friendship. Michael was a teller of tales, full of wit and humor, and personal insights that you might not hear anywhere. Over the subsequent years, on our regular visits to Ojai, my partner Laura and I, we always took the opportunity to sit down, share a conversation, and a meal with Michael. Sometimes these conversations were over the lovely Ojai oranges, plucked fresh right from these trees. Other times they were over tea or breakfast under that tree over there. We subsequently learned that he had a soft spot for sweets, particularly the Northern European kind. So over the next few holidays, we made it a point to share with Michael the German Stollens, marzipans, Danish kringles, and more. I was curious about Michael. So over one particular holiday break, Michael was very chatty, and he shared with us how he had, quote-unquote, escaped from the post-war gloom in Germany. He wanted nothing to do with it. He subsequently went over the Himalayas, to Tibet, to Pakistan, to the pyramids in Giza, across Northern Africa, Southeast Asia, and he would tell us all these tales. He was traveling in search of truth and light. And over that course of conversation, he managed to finish the entire Stollen. Somehow he stumbled here in Krishnaji's circle, and the rest, as they say, is history. What an extraordinary life he had, and what an impact he made on everyone. When the Thomas fire broke out a few years ago, we were very worried about the retreat and the foundation. When we made our way here, we learned that Michael did not want to evacuate. He was ready to go down with it if that's what it meant. Thankfully, it didn't come down to it. We always saw Michael as an avuncular figure, the wise uncle who had these extraordinary set of stories and insights, but those that he would share only sparingly and only when bribed with appropriate sweets. Michael, we are so very grateful that you shared with us your kindness, your grace, your wit, stories with generosity. While we are deeply saddened, you will forever remain in our hearts. There's one last story I'd like to share. Over the pandemic and over the last few holidays, as sometimes we came here to rejuvenate, recharge, relax, or even renew, we always asked Michael what he looked most forward to in the year. And he always said, He said, life and whatever it offers. And that was Michael Krohnen. Rest in peace.
Hello, folks. Thank you. Wasn't sure if I would share this story. It's a short, brief story about Michael, but my name is Dean Arvidsson. I had the very good fortune to work at the Oak Grove School in 1984 and 1985. That was the last year of Krishnamurti's life, and I also had the great fortune to meet Krishnamurti and have dialogues right here in this room in the spring of '85. And I knew Michael, of course, from the school. He was the chef there, and he would prepare the most delicious lunches 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, for the faculty and staff and the students that were attending at the school there. In the spring, Krishnamurti would, he was traveling the world, and he would come to Ojai in the spring and stay here. Many of you know this. And Michael, at that time, came up here and started preparing Krishnamurti's food. And they had I think she may have been an Argentinian woman. She was associated with the school. Other people probably know the story better than I do, but she took over Michael's role of preparing those daily meals. It's a daily lunch and for the faculty and staff and the students. And she's a very nice woman. She must have had some experience as a chef, as a cook. The meals, I'm afraid to say, that very first meal was not the same quality that we were all used to. It was not Michael Krohnen's quality of food. And no one said anything, but we all, the general feeling, there was an awareness of this. And the word must have gotten back to Michael. The very next day, he came down and assisted her in preparing the meal that day, and it may have been the next few days, and the quality went right back up to what we were used to, and things went on from there. I had a number of interactions with Michael at that time. I never knew him well. Other people knew him better, but the last interaction, I would occasionally come up to the foundation here, and I remember having a very nice dialogue with him in the bookstore, and it was like, okay, we were on the same wavelength. Nice, Michael. Glad to see that, and I considered him a friend, a good friend. Rest in peace.
Hello, everyone. My name's Gianni, and it's been wonderful to hear so many stories about Michael and to hear his laugh. I've not known Michael for nearly as long as many people in this room, but I've known Michael the majority of my life. I remember when he came in, I was a student at Oak Grove School, and in 3rd grade, we had a special visitor. And it was Michael coming in with a VHS tape of the young adventures of young Indiana Jones and Jiddu Krishnamurti. And I remember he came in, said hello, and we never really got to watch VHS tapes, so it was like, whoa, he brought that too? And he put it in, and we watched it, and that was amazing. But then, Michael loves his history and would go over all of the details of, well, the Theosophical Society this, and, Annie Besant this, and Ledbetter this. And I don't think it was any of the words that my 9-year-old ears was really gripped by, but more so his presence as a person and the light that would come into the room. And then, like Anne had shared some years back, I had also worked at the retreat and then got to re-meet Michael and get to know him in that sense. And I just wanted to say that I'm very grateful. And I will say that what I hold in my heart the most about Michael is that he was a great appreciator of beauty. And I remember every day when he'd come back, he's like, oh, I went down to Ventura. There wouldn't be a trip to Ventura where he wouldn't stop at the beach. And I remember that every day he'd come and say, I stopped at the beach. So thank you, Michael.
Are we complete? Albert Einstein or Krishnamurti? Which would you prefer? I have a couple quotes that might just kind of wrap it up. Okay, we'll start with Albert. Krishnamurti, okay. Well, you can't go wrong. Thank you. Oh, is that what you do? Okay, sorry. A human being is part of a whole, called by us the universe, limited in time and space. We experience ourselves, our thoughts and feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical illusion of the consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and affections for a few people. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison. We need to widen our circle of understanding and compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. That was Albert. And this is 1958, Pune, Krishnamurti. This is from the Friends of Brockwood Park letter that Bill just sent out. The individual cannot tackle the mountain outside, but the individual can set a new current of thought the new current will create a different series of actions. One cannot do anything about the worldwide condition. Historically, events must take their own brutal, cruel, indifferent course. The individual cannot tackle the mountain outside, but the individual can set a new current of thought going, which will create a different series of action. That was what Michael loved. Just those words over and over in different ways. So, thank you for being here today, and hopefully we'll stay in touch and see you again. All the best.